Good evening. When we hear word violin, what kind of association comes to our mind? This can be shape of this unusual musical instrument. We can talk about great violin makers, creators of this instrument that was designed more than 400 years ago using golden proportions. We can mention about greatest names on the history of violin making, like Antonio Stradivari, his teacher Niccolo Amati, Giuseppe Guarneri del Gesù, Jean-Baptiste Vuillaume. I can talk about all of these different topics because my formal education is a professional violinist. I spent 17 years in former Soviet Union studying violin. This includes 8 years music school, 4 years music college, and 5 years university, which was called Saratov State Conservatory in Russia. When I became more and more advanced player, I couldn't help but notice that every violin has its own unique voice, its own sound. And that's how I started to read and learn more and more about violin making. Upon graduation from university, I was presented with opportunity to start an apprenticeship with a very famous violin maker, Denis Yarovoy in Moscow, who in his time studied violin making in Italy. He was actually born in Italy, and therefore he was fluent in 5 languages: Italian, German, French, English, and of course Russian. What was quite unique about him also that with his enormous knowledge on this every topic of the violin making, he was very much willing to share it with anybody who was interested to learn. What else is quite amazing about violin making? That with all science and technology, we're still using the same tools which makers used centuries ago, with little bit improvement, of course. But creation of new instruments involves only handmade job. Here I am cutting the maple board with hand saw to right measurements, and this is a very high quality piece of wood, and I kept it drying for more than 10 years, so there is no room for mistake. This is look inside of my workshop, which I designed and built by myself, except for bookcase on the left side. One of the part of my job is, of course, creating new instruments. Another part is restoration and repair of older instruments. In a few next slides, you will see before and after. Like this particular violin was left in a car in a parking lot under strong sunlight. And what you see that varnish completely melted on the top plate, and it went with small bubbles all the way around the whole instrument. This is completely broken top on another violin, and I always challenge myself to preserve original condition of the instrument and make my restoration work invisible in the future. Next slide shows restoration on a double bass. So I'm not repairing only violins. As you can see, some parts of the wood were replaced with fresh wood. Some cracks been reglued, and here I'm reshaping a bass bar on a double bass. Next slide shows repair on restoration on a more than 200 years old violin with completely broken scroll. And as I said previously, I tried to make my invasion or restoration as less visible as possible. You can see on the bottom pictures that it's hardly noticeable. On the next slides, you will see transformation of raw piece of wood into violin. More than 20 years ago, my family decided to leave Russia and move to Canada. We didn't know what to expect in Canada, but it was quite obvious that I wouldn't be able to continue as a violin maker because of political and economic instability in Russia. So after studying English in ESL college, I got my first job in big music store in downtown called World Music. I spent there 5 years working in string repair department, and that's how I introduced myself to many professional players, teachers, students, and the violin enthusiasts. In 1998, I opened my own business in Richmond. It's called Michael Altshuler Violin Shop. Here you see some violin plates already finished almost and ready to be assembled. I always challenge myself to improve my professional skills, and I send my instruments to participate in international violin makers competitions. My first diploma I got in 1986 in the Moscow competition. Second was in the international Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow in 1990. From Vancouver, I've sent my instruments to very famous Italian Cremona competition, which is like Olympic Games for violin makers. And I got diplomas from 2009 and 2012 for both of my instruments. You can see there's violin hanging on display. So when violin like this is finished, and it's not only looks nice, but also getting compliments from professional players for sound quality, there's a real satisfaction for me. And it's quite obvious that my family and we did right choice by moving to Canada, where I'm able to do what I really love to do. Thank you.
Thank you.